Hello and welcome to another That's Just Wild Q&A, where we take on your burning questions about nature and wildlife. I'm Steve Backshaw, and as always, I'm joined by...
Me, Lizzie Daly.
And me, Sarah Roberts.
Now, the first question is for you, Steve, today from Basil in York. And it's, are there parasites that benefit their hosts? It's a good question.
I love this question. I love this subject. In fact, we should definitely do parasites as one of our main shows one time, because it's a vast subject. I used to have a comedy show that I did on parasites.
You had a comedy show?
I mean, it wasn't funny.
Sarah?
I mean, it was
No, I'm not doubting it for a second.
you see that
It just seemed
absolute
like
doubt and dismay?
absolute disbelief that I could ever say anything funny.
End of
it was
podcast
just
already.
a far jump from everything that
cut
I
to the
know
quick.
so far.
I am cut to the quick.
When was this?
Well, do you know the guys who do the Infinite Monkey Cage?
Yeah.
They do live shows at places like the Apollo, where
Yeah.
lots of people come in and do little comedy skits, and that was me. I did
did
it
the
on
comedy?
Parasites. Yeah, I did.
What was it called?
Recently, then?
It's called Parasites.
Oh, to the point.
I mean, yeah.
Did you get a lot of laughs?
Well, I
It's
mean,
quite a morbid
Steve,
topic to lead with.
the utter
Sarah, you're kind
disbelief.
of being a little
Oh
bit...
my gosh.
We've only just
I want to
started
see
here.
it. I mean, I would have bought a ticket. I would have been there to watch.
Yeah, I'm not buying any of that. But
Okay, so
to
you've
me,
covered
this is such a fascinating topic, and it could be the biggest topic in biology. You know, there's a lot of ideas that parasites are the reason that we have skin, that we have an immune system, that everything in biology has been driven by this need to stay ahead of parasites. So it's a massive topic, one that I love. If you are to be pedantic, are there parasites that benefit their hosts? In strict biology, if it's a parasite and it benefits its host, it's not classified as being a parasite.
Yeah.
The relationship is commensal or mutualist. But let's leave that to one side for the moment and talk about things that are, typically considered to be parasites that might have a benefit for their host. And the first one that sprung to mind for me was the Greenland shark.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So Greenland sharks, this ancient animal that could live for more than 400 years, lives with a copepod on its eyeball for its entire life. Almost all of them have this thing that hangs like a string off their eyeball, and it's feeding on the eyeball. So at first sight would appear to be a pure parasite.
At first sight.
At first sight. Well, I mean, they probably don't see that well with a parasite
Well, they
hanging off
didn't
their
get it
eyeball.
at first sight, did they?
But there is an idea that potentially it could focus like a lure. So there are lots of marine creatures that have lures around the mouth, around the head, that can attract things to come to them. Think of it like a hairy frogfish with a little shrimp dangling in front of its head, as a way of enticing prey to come to them. So maybe this little copepod hanging off the eyeball of the Greenland shark is enticing things to swim towards the mouth of the Greenland shark.
Wow.
So it functions like a lure. So that was my first thought. But then my bigger thought was about internal parasites.
I'm glad you touched on this.
Go on.
In humans or in...
Yes.
Yeah, so tapeworms and things.
Yes.
And this is interesting because you say, by definition, there is no way that it can benefit the host. But I have actually read that there are tapeworms that apparently short-term in humans can actually benefit somebody. In fact, if anything, their immune system is actually operating better because it's being kind of activated, right?
Spot on. Yeah. So I first read about this in one of my... anyone out there looking for a popular science book, check out Parasite Rex by Carl Zimmer, or I Contain Multitudes by Ed Yong. And they focus on this exact thing. And there have been some scientific studies with people who suffer from paralyzing allergies, things like Crohn's disease, things like terrible asthma, and they can't find anything to get around it, have been deliberately infected with things like hookworms and have gone into remission.
Wow.
One of the ideas is if you look at people who are, for example, living in New Guinea, still living the same lives that they have done for tens of thousands of years, they have a very high parasite load and almost none of these diseases that we consider to be modern diseases. They're not celiac. They're not really heavily affected by kind of allergens in food. And one reason could be that you've got all these parasites inside you. Your immune system is constantly working to suppress them. You have evolved over millions of years to have a parasite load. And now all of a sudden in the modern world, we've got rid of all our parasites. We do not have, as a rule, the kind of parasite load that we would have in nature. And so potentially our immune systems are in overdrive and they're battling our normal functions, which could be why we're having all of these chronic allergic reactions to things. Now, so I read about this, thought this was the solution to everything, and I haven't seen a lot more about it recently. So I think there's probably a lot more work needs to be done, but it's really exciting.
Well, I thought you were just going to say when you were talking about the worms and you're like beneficial. I've always joked about like, I just need worms for a few weeks or a few months, you know, when you're thinking about your summer body and the rest of it. I thought you were just going to go straight on. Yeah, hot girl summer. I thought you were just going straight down there as a diet side of it. I had no idea that there were so many other benefits.
It's really intriguing how your mind works, Sarah. Seriously.
Logic.
Do you know what, though? What's intriguing about that is that would not work. So I have studied the biggest tapeworms that people have ever had, and they would stretch across a tennis court. They're absolutely enormous. And the person that has that tapeworm inside them is not going to be unusually thin or unusually fat. They appear to have no external signs that they have a giant 30-meter long tapeworm inside them.
So hang on a minute. So somebody just continued on with a 30-meter. It wasn't coming out because now you're saying that I'm thinking of bears, grizzly bears, obviously, and their tapeworms, which are meters and meters long that straggle behind them as they walk and then get hooked on things.
You'd notice if that was
I was going to say when you say this was 30, it was still inside them, 30 meters and still inside. Gross.
But and this is an interesting point, actually, when you talk about the impact, because everything that I was reading is that it's a short-term, long-term, so like a few years, but short-term thing. They don't understand the long-term effects of having something like that in the body.
This Greenland shark, just before we end this, the parasite that lives on its eye, is that the same? Well, firstly, how slow is it eating? The Greenland shark lives for hundreds and hundreds of years. And this parasite, it's not finished the eyeball in that time. Or...
No, I mean, it's a gradual thing, and they don't need a huge amount of energy. And obviously the eyeball is going to be continually being replenished with nutrients throughout the life of the Greenland shark. And so almost certainly the Greenland shark is at least visually impaired, if not functionally blind. But it can still live its life because sharks have got so many other senses that they can use to find things around them, primarily smell under the ice. And so they just seem to coexist. And whether that is, an old-fashioned parasitic relationship that doesn't bug the Greenland shark that much, maybe, or it could be that it is actively being used to entice food in, which is... kind of, I think, to the heart of our question from Basil. Thank you very much for that.
It's a copepod, right, on the eye?
Yeah.
So they cope with it.
Next.
Next.
He's opening.
I quite like it.
That'll make
I
it.
like it.
Put that
And
in
you
the
said
edit.
it on a pod as well. So.
Yeah. Come on.
So now for you, Sarah, from Josephine. Giraffes fed off high trees, so the trees got taller. The trees got taller, so the giraffes' necks got longer. Would this just keep on going? In a million years, would giraffes and the trees be much taller than they are now, or have I misunderstood something?
I love this so much. I love it.
So I want to just be like, that's absolutely right. Brilliant, move on. But it's not, is it? So let's dig into it a little bit more. What she is getting at here is coevolution. And that does happen. If you're a giraffe, the giraffe likes to eat the acacia tree. The acacia tree does not want to completely be eaten by the giraffe, but over a lot of time that evolves, it changes, and the giraffe changes too. But it's not just about that one food source. There's other variable factors that the giraffe is evolving for. And this is where it comes to sex. So the giraffe has its neck also to reach these high up areas in the tree that no other animal has adapted to eat from, but it also takes part in something called necking. Steve, I'm sure you're aware of that.
Why do I get the piercing look at that moment?
Well, anyway,
Sarah, don't pretend like you haven't done some necking.
I mean, I
You
don't
dabble.
know. I dabble
in a bit of necking?
but my forehead isn't quite strong enough for those battles. But basically, giraffes have a really long neck, and when they're competing for their mates, they tend to smash each other. They will throw those necks and heads around, and they'll smash skulls with each other. and they'll assert their dominance in that way. And
Have you seen it in the wild, Sarah?
I have, and it's kind of weird. I always think everything when you're watching a giraffe looks like it's slow motion.
Yeah, I
I
know what you
often,
mean.
yeah, it makes me feel like maybe this is what mice feel like when they watch us walk. But like even seeing a giraffe run, it's almost like slow motion, just
Yeah.
because they're so big and lanky in the way
Yeah.
that they move.
I have a little fact that relates to that.
Yeah.
So you know the little horns on
Mhm.
top of a giraffe's head, ossicones?
Yep.
If you can't see the bits of a giraffe, if you look at the top of the ossicones, on a male giraffe, they will be pretty much bald because they've been smashing them against other males and it rubs the hairs off. So the females, which usually have lighter spots as well, those are down to testosterone, the females will have really hairy ossicones and the males will have bald ones.
Cool.
So speaking of those ossicones, there was a museum curator who made a discovery in 1996. I don't know if either of you are aware of this, but it was a ancient relative of the giraffe, and they had only found the skull. So they'd found the skull with the ossicones, and what they saw were loads and loads of marks all over its head where it had clearly been taking part in necking. So there is a theory that although the giraffes benefit from being able to access the taller parts of the tree, that actually that might be a side product, and the real product was that they developed the necks because they were more likely to survive and reproduce if they were particularly good in those necking competitions. And so eventually giraffes' necks got longer and longer, but they still just have those same amount of 7 vertebrae that we have in our neck. They're just elongated.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well is, would they just keep growing and keep getting longer? I mean, their necks are going to get a bit more brittle if it were to keep going.
Also thinking about the blood flow.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
it's already
size of
an
the heart.
absolute beast trying to get that blood flow 2 meters high to the head to
Yeah.
be able to keep that animal alive, right? So having a neck that's like 10 more meters high, it's just going to be nearly
Yeah.
impossible.
And also for the acacia tree, like the acacia tree, that's under different selective advantages for being the size that it is. But if it keeps growing higher and higher, then you've got to think about drought. You've got to think about the trunk of the tree. You also have to think about elephants if you're somewhere in Africa, because as you know, elephants love to knock down any kind of tall tree. So yeah, it's co-evolution does happen, but it's not as simple as just 2 species co-evolutionizing together. Can I say that word? Come on, scientists,
I
help
think
me
you
out.
absolutely should say that, and I think that is going to be in the OED
Dictionary.
next
Yeah.
year.
There we go. Nailed it.
Congratulations.
On giraffes, we were filming in Zambia last year, and we have this impression of giraffes as being this kind of gangly, sort of stretched Bambi kind of
Yeah.
animal, being quite dainty and fragile. And we had the biggest bull giraffe I've ever seen, completely on his own, solitary, walk past our vehicle, and it was as intimidating a sight as being alongside a big elephant. The
Really?
muscularity, the formidable potential power of the animal was quite awe-inspiring. There was a pride of lions in front of us, maybe 12 of them, lying in the shade under a bush, and this giraffe walked straight up to them and walked past them with its shoulders going like a bodybuilder, like, come on then.
Yeah,
And the lions,
try
you could
it.
see a couple of them sat up and went, no, and like straight back down again.
Have you seen the lion prides attempting predation on a giraffe? It's
What,
a
when they kick?
brutal scene, yeah. Imagine being on like the back end of one of those legs. It's just like, no thanks.
You
I
must
don't
be
know.
toe punted to Mars. wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't like going around the back end of a horse. So
Oh God, no. No.
giraffes for me.
Yeah.
Mm.
So in answer to the question, I guess we wouldn't have meters and meters of neck on a giraffe in hundreds
No.
of years, right?
No, not unless there are lots and lots of other factors all happening at the same time. But it is
Exactly.
a great question, and it's not
Love it.
completely far out. It's just that there's a little bit more to it than you would first think. Devil's
As
in
a
the detail.
side note, when evolution was in its early stages, the giraffe's neck was part of a sort of side hypothesis about evolution, Lamarckian evolution. Have you heard about that?
Lamarck, yeah.
Yeah, that's
As in
way
his-
back in the back of my
yeah.
brain somewhere. But
Yeah.
the idea was that actually within the animal's lifetime, it would reach up higher and higher and higher, and the neck would
Traits are
stretch
selected.
and get longer.
Yeah, that was kind of not debunked, but I guess
Oh,
people,
massively
people,
debunked.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of just disregarded, which is kind of, imagine being him, being like, this is it,
This is my
selected
idea.
traits, yeah.
Yes.
Everyone's like, oh, jog on, Lamarck, you're on, off to the next.
Well,
Anyway,
the next
on to
question,
the next.
Lizzie, is for you.
Okay.
And it's from another Sarah. And
Did you ask this question?
it's from another
It's
Sarah.
just a really generic name.
Yeah, we're quite popular in the outer world there. This question is, are shark attacks really a case of mistaken identity?
Oh my gosh, we could do a whole podcast on this alone, couldn't we?
Yes.
I want you guys to chip in on this as well because you are the shark experts. And I want to start with you, Sarah, because you are somebody, and she doesn't often talk about this. I don't know if you know this, Steve, but she was actually bitten by a shark, only a lemon to be fair. But still, was it a case of mistaken identity?
No, I think it knew exactly what I was. But I mean, that situation was completely and utterly like my own fault, hazard of the job.
And were you
'cause-
handling the shark?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is an important note.
Mhm.
I know there's so many statistics and facts around, and Steve, you know these, but there's so many facts around actually how many sharks do attack and bites happen throughout the year. Just this year alone, the new stats, 11 across the world recorded shark attacks resulted in 5 fatalities, and 4 of those were cases where sharks were being handled or directly disturbed or in fishing activity. So again, it gives you an idea of how rare this really is. And it's an interesting one. It's complex. General hypothesis considers swimmers, snorkelers, and surfers to be mistaken for seals or sea lions, right? Research does actually show that some bites can happen because of this. From a shark's perspective, the silhouette from certain angles, that can actually be the case, but it's a complete oversimplification of sharks, how they sense the world. And visually, that's just kind of one of the senses that they're using to hunt. They've got their lateral lines, electroreception, noise, smells, incredible sense of smell. So I think just to assume that every shark, as sophisticated as it is, survived millions of years as an apex predator, just thinks that a seal might be a human and vice versa. I think it's just a very kind of, it's an easy one to jump on, I feel.
It is. There's one kind of element to that, which is that particularly when seals are fed on at the surface, it is during low light conditions. So great whites breaching on seals will do so at dusk and dawn
Yep.
at the exact right time when they have the jump on the seals because the seal's eyesight hasn't quite been able to kick in yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that the shark, with all those other senses you mentioned, has very, very slightly got the edge on
Yeah.
the seal. And so in that scenario, were you to be swimming at the surface and create the silhouette that is similar to that of a seal, mistaken identity is absolutely possible, even in an animal that has those array of fantastic senses. The answer to the question is sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, you said there have been 11 shark attacks this year, and that might sound a lot to people, but it really isn't. I mean, you think about, how many people will have been bitten by dogs in this country alone this year. It is going to be more than 11. That is for
Yeah.
absolute sure. And, I think I've spent thousands of hours now in the water with sharks, and for the most part, they totally ignore me. I've had great white sharks swim around me to get to food that is behind me.
Mm-hmm.
They will actively avoid me if I'm in the way. I've also been bitten 4 times, but they've always been locations where there's been a lot of food in the water, where there's been a lot of activity going on, when it's been quite frenetic. And in every one of those situations, the shark went, no, and then just let me go and swam off.
Yeah, and it's
You've
that kind
never
of
mentioned these shark bites before, Steve.
They're,
Why are
they're
we
all
not seeing
pretty
these?
unimpressive. Unfortunately, none of them have left decent dinner party scars. So what can I say?
TBC. But yeah, that exploratory behaviour and the curiosity, it's not theory necessarily, but that was kind of the other thing that's widely accepted, isn't it? That often these shark bites in these cases result in exactly that, a bite and then off they go. And so,
That's the bit I find kind of the most interesting, just to be devil's advocate. But great white sharks, when they hunt, will sometimes take a bite, let the animal bleed out a little bit, and then return because they want to protect their sensory systems, which are really important to them, especially their eyes. Um, we don't often leave people in the water after they've been bitten once to say, well, is the shark going to come back now? Was it an exploratory bite and mistaken identity, or might it go around in a circle and come back and take another few bites? It's very, very rare that we don't have somebody shooting out on a boat or surfer or somebody trying to pull that person back out of the water. But we do know that their diet preferences don't favour human blood or
And also,
stuff
I
we're
think
made of.
exactly to Steve's point, it's environmental, isn't it? A lot of
Mm.
it. There's so many other factors at play. So there was that one case, unfortunately, of the man in Sydney Harbour in Australia, and he went out swimming first thing. So it was at dawn. The water was really murky, and then this, I think it was a white shark that literally got him in one, and then continued to
Yeah, that definitely fed on
consume
him.
his whole body.
Mm.
And so then the whole uproar was around, why has this shark then gone back for more? And it could also be the case that there's other influences on, say, said individual shark. Is it a juvenile? Is it, struggling for resources? Is it already injured? There's lots of different factors to consider.
That's an interesting one because I'm trying to find it. Haven't found it online. There were in Egypt a few years ago a spate of attacks within a very short space of time, and in an area where shark attacks are very, very rare. And it happened within 3 or 4 days. Several people were attacked, and environmental factors seemed to be the reason. And the reason was probably that the sea was unusually warm, that there had possibly been a dumping at sea of a whole bunch
Yeah, I
of
heard the
food waste,
carcasses. Yeah.
and that these things all came together to create a very, very unusual perfect storm of, shark activity, where people did end up getting deliberately bitten. But it is fantastically rare.
So rare. So rare. Love it. I think we answered that one. Should we move on?
We did.
Okay, final question, Steve, is from Ryan from Instagram. Did stonefish specifically evolve to mess up humans? What's up with that? Pretending to be a rock in the shallows with a spine that a bird wouldn't step on, maybe designed to combat rays. But why look like a rock?
Ryan, that is a brilliant question, and it's something that I have thought about many times myself. It just seems like the stonefish is overpowered. I was lucky enough to film with stonefish earlier this year with the legend Miller Wilson, internet sensation. He's got like 5 million followers and he's about 19 years of age. But we went out
Wow.
and I know, just don't even go there.
Okay.
It just makes me feel massively inadequate. But we went out and we found stonefish, estuarine stonefish. And if you expose their dorsal spines and you put some pressure down on them, the venom squirts up in the air like 30 centimeters, like a foot in the air, out from the inside of these hypodermic syringe spines. And it's excruciatingly painful, and it just appears to be totally overpowered.
Ah,
And the question is, why?
yeah.
Why, when it seems to have evolved to prevent people stepping on it, does
Yeah.
it need to have that amount of venom, that toxicity of venom, that ability to cause pain? Why would that happen? And the answer is it doesn't, and it hasn't. It hasn't evolved to stop us stepping on it. It's evolved for some other reason. So effectively, below the surface of the skin, you've got particular cells which can secrete substances out onto the skin. That can start with antimicrobial substances, antibacterial substances, substances that soften the skin or that make it unpalatable. And over time, through evolution, those become more and more potent, and they can start to form clusters around particular parts of the animal that can be used for defense. So in my master's thesis, I was studying how sharp-ribbed newts have those clusters around where their sharpened ribs are pressed out through their body into the mouth of an
cool.
attacker, therefore injecting venom into the mouth of whatever is attacking them. And in things like stonefish, they formed into paired venom glands at the base of these hollow spines, which now, today, can create these squirts of, for some reason, blue venom.
Blue.
Blue venom.
I didn't know that.
That's the factual bit. This bit is from my own head. So,
That's how I start every sentence.
yeah, I reckon, the sentence that no scientist should ever use, I reckon the reason that the stonefish appears to be so overpowered is because I think it's down to another animal that lives in their habitat. So you see these exact spines on catfish in Amazonia. And the reason they have them is because crocs bite a hold of these catfish and the spine impales in the mouth, in the roof of the mouth of the croc, and the croc releases it and lets it go, and they swim away completely scot-free, completely alive. My suggestion is that those stonefish spines and stings have evolved to prevent them getting munched by crocs. Saltwater crocs. Saltwater crocs. Everywhere you find stonefish, you find saltwater crocs.
Interesting.
Does that sound reasonable?
It sounds reasonable, but do the spines ever break? Has there been any evidence of these spines in the mouths of crocs or anything?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Well, I wonder.
Well, that's
Maybe
the next
somebody's
part,
seen it.
isn't it? He's got his hypothesis. He's
I've got to go
a
out and test it.
scientist.
So in the
yeah.
next
I've got to
episode,
start-
we're going to
Yeah.
the field.
Going up to crocs, saying open
That's
wide.
that's really
But
interesting.
so one kind of answer to that could be that maybe crocs have been around for a very long time. Stonefish and their ancestors
Yeah.
have been around for even longer.
Yeah.
It's possible that there has become an adaptive phase where crocs have just gone, oh, I don't eat those,
Yeah.
so they don't eat them anymore.
What are the ones that we have in the UK that's kind of similar?
Weaverfish.
Weaverfish.
So
Were they
weaverfish-
eaten by crocs? How did they get this
That's a very good
situation?
question. Well, so dorsal spines on fish are very, very common. Lots and lots of fish have a dorsal spine, which can be used to
Lionfish?
alter how they. Yeah, it can be used for trim, for movement in the water, and it can be used for defense. And they can be used for defense even if they don't have any venom glands attached. They can still work. They're sharp. They're pointy. They stop things biting them. The weaver fish. The only thing that I ever saw my dad crying for was having stepped on a weaver fish when we were kids. And he was just in so much pain that he cried. And it's a very similar mechanism, even though the two weaverfish and stonefish aren't particularly closely related.
This is a very basic thought process, but I would have assumed...
You're a very basic lass.
I'm a basic girl. But because of how a stonefish lives, so camouflaged, so sedentary, so hidden, I just would have thought it would have been selected for. The more exposed it is to potential predators that any predator could come along, the more that kind of trait would be selected for.
It does appear that it's kind of evolved to stop things stepping on it, and what else other than a human is going to step on it? So if it's not that, then I think it needs to be something taking it into its mouth
Yes,
that it's
a big
protecting it
pressure.
against. And if it's not crocs, maybe it's sharks, maybe it's something else in that area. But I
Interesting.
don't think they've evolved to stop things stepping on them. I think that's just incidental and something we should
Yes,
consider
yeah.
ourselves to be not
Unfortunately.
particularly lucky for.
Yeah, exactly.
All that you've done, though, is highlight the absolute inadequacies and the
Of human?
the just absolute false sense of security I get through wearing wetsuit boots.
Yeah, those aren't going to help.
Absolutely
Not
useless.
at all.
I
In
tell you
fact, a
what
wetsuit boot is what we used to make it
That-
squirt venom.
That's what you just said. That's where I'm like, well, that was absolute waste of money.
My last thing on stonefish, while we've got it, is that the stonefish venom, the most venomous fish in the world, they are said to have one of the most painful venoms of any in the world, but it is proteinaceous. It has a very, very high protein content. So the treatment for a stonefish sting is very hot water. Very hot water denatures those proteins, much like an egg white boiling, and it kind of stops the pain almost instantly.
That's all we've got time for this week. Send your questions along to questions@that'sjustwild.com and we'll answer them on the show.
See you next week.